Hello, everybody. Yeah, wrong button there at the beginning. Way to start off the show in a good step. Hello, and welcome to another adventure in history. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope that the world is treating you nicely. It's been a somewhat interesting Thursday. Days are honestly starting to sort of run together because it's summertime for me, and the the days kind of start mushing. Did a little bit of work, not too much. Didn't hurt myself very much. Read a little bit of Tolkien. Had some fun. Did my thing. Tried to exercise. Got really sweaty. I don't know if it actually accomplished anything, but welcome everybody, and hope that you're having a good one. All right, so what's up, KP? Good to see you. We didn't have a viewer request stream this Tuesday because I was making a guest appearance over on Homozygote's channel. To all of you that stopped by and hung out, I appreciate your support. Had a pretty good chat. It went, I think about as well as it could have. I really didn't know exactly what we'd be getting into, but it sort of turned into just a general kind of talk about me thing, which goodness gracious knows I can do. So,
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
Kyle, what's up, man? Thank you so much for that subscription and for 38 months of continued support. That's kind of crazy. Kind of crazy. I hope that Texlahoma is treating you nicely. I had a theory about the flight situation that we were talking about yesterday, and I think it might be that everybody is flying out on that Monday, and they are potentially short-staffed, so they might have like cut flights to try to handle the rush. But that's just a hypothesis. It's very, very odd that there are literally no flights out of Charlotte on Monday. So, very odd. For those of you that don't have any idea what we're talking about, Kyle and I were talking yesterday on Messenger about potentially meeting up at Heroes Con, which is next week, which is something that I was about to get to. So next week, I will not be here on Thursday. We will be at probably arriving to Charlotte around the time that I would normally start streaming. So we are not going to have a regular stream. I am hoping to stream on Tuesday. I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem. I do have some family stuff going on earlier in the afternoon, but I don't think it's going to run for 4 hours. We'll see. But when we get more people here and sort of more in the swing of the show, we'll have to have a bit of a discussion about exactly what we're going to stream next Tuesday, because there are options. But we'll get there later on. It usually takes a little while for the room to sort of fill up. You know how that goes. But anyway, we've got a pretty interesting set of material tonight to talk about, and I think everybody knows that I have not necessarily what I would call an odd.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
Well, I mean, I guess I am odd,
I'm
but
Spartacus.
Matt.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
Spartacus!
Matt, thank you so much for gift subbing to my wife. Appreciate your continued support as well. I have an interest in Central Asia, which is something that a lot of people, especially in the history background that I have in America, doesn't particularly care for very much, right? It's not necessarily something that you get really excited about talking about Central Asia, but I find it fascinating. So anytime we get to talk about Central Asia, it's a good day for me, right? Um, so we were talking about the Central Asian Islamic empires last time, and I know that everybody remember exactly what we were talking about. But we left off discussing a group of people that had taken over a fairly sizable chunk of
camels, horses, an armed escort, provisions, desert vehicles,
moose.
and tanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for activating the hype train with your bit donation. Hope you're doing well. But we were talking about a group called the Samanids. And this was a group of Muslims that had taken over a big chunk of this Central Asian world, and they had set themselves up a rather sizable chunk of territory which sat right here in Central Asia. So we're talking again about this region that I lovingly refer to as the stands, because this is where all of the countries that end with Stan are. If we throw up our map here, we've got Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, etc. Right? So sort of this nice Central Asian location. And the Samanids were going pretty well. And that's where we're going to actually pick up tonight. And we're going to start with a guy named Ismail Samani. Now, I wish that I could show you a really cool picture of Ismail Samani, but I can't. The closest thing that I can do is show you a pretty cool picture of his tomb, which itself we can talk about because it's going to tell us quite a bit about the Samanids that we're looking at. Now, we've looked at some of their architecture before in previous streams, but to sort of refresh everybody, what we've got going on here is a really interesting mix of several different styles of art and architecture. If we're looking at stuff like the decorative patterns here, this is Muslim and especially Persian flavored Muslim art to a T, right? But we've also got these really interesting domes, which are very common in Central Asian types of buildings, somewhat reminiscent of a stupa, which would be, of course, a Buddhist temple. Altmas Frizzle, it is quite beautiful. It's a really neat little place, and you can go visit it if you really want to. But this is sort of emblematic of the Samanid people that we're talking about here. They are a mix of several different groups of people. They themselves were Persians, and even though they had converted to Islam, they had held on to sort of this kind of Persian flavor. In fact, the language of their court was Persian instead of Arabic, and they weren't necessarily afraid of using life imagery, so pictures of animals or people in their art, and I showed several pieces of that artwork in our last stream about the Samanids, but specifically here about Ismail Samani. We're going to really talk about him basically setting up what we might consider sort of the high water mark of the Samanid Empire. He had started expanding the empire in the 9th century, so before the 1000s, but is going to continue that over into, prior to the 900s. We're looking at the 10th century, which is 900 to 1000. And he's going to rule just for the first 7 years of our century, but in that 7 years, and he had ruled that went back into the 800s as well, he's going to really bring in a lot of money. And specifically what he's going to be looking at is holding on to these big trade cities. And we've mentioned this many, many times before, but this particular zone here is directly linked to the Silk Road. So a lot of these big cities like Samarkand and Merv, which sounds like a television show producer from the 70s, and cities like Ray, and these big cities that today are sort of lost in the shuffle are actually going to be very, very important to the ancient world. And in the Central Asian sort of market, these are going to be the places where all of the cool stuff gets traded. This is going to be stuff coming out of China and coming into Central Asia, as well as stuff coming out of Northern Africa, the Middle East, and Europe going towards China. And with this big influx of money that Ismail Samani is going to have access to, he is really going to sort of just go all in with this art and architectural push. And this is going to be a flowering age of art and writing and scholarship. There's going to be a really big library at their capital, which is this city called Bukhara. And there are going to be all sorts of different types of scholars that visit this library and bring with them documents from across the world. So this is something that might be akin to something like the House of Wisdom that was in Baghdad, or the Library of Alexandria, if you're more familiar with that. But this was a pretty interesting time to live in Central Asia. There was a lot of cosmopolitan activity. There was a lot of really interesting mixes of cultures and peoples. And that's going to be really, really great until, there's always sort of that until moment. And that's mostly going to come when Ismail Samani dies. He is going to be, of course, part of a dynasty, and he's going to pass rule to his family members, but the Samanids are never really going to kind of hit that mark again. Now, they're not going to be what we might say is bad off. They're actually sitting in pretty good territory. If we just look at them on the map here, this is at the...
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
Metrant. Just dropping by to update Spartaci. Yeah. Hoping to catch some more streams as the summer starts. All right, Metrant, that sounds great. I hope that you're doing well. I don't know if you had to sit in exams or do big projects at the end of the term, but I hope all of those went well also. Always good to see you, my friend, and I hope that you're having a good one. So the map that we're looking at right here is a map of the Samanids at their height, and this is at the death of the Emir several after our buddy Ismail. Words are hard. Ismail. This is at the death of keep clicking the wrong thing. A guy named Nasser II, who is a pretty powerful guy, sort of the last of the powerful rulers. But what we see here is that the Samanids had expanded. They had taken over territory all the way over here into what might be considered part of the Tibetan Plateau. They had a lot of the regions that we might refer to as Takharistan or Sogdia, lots of different words for these areas. But they had also moved down here and pretty much turned the Saffarids into a vassal state. Now, we talked about the Saffarids in our last stream. They had a very brief independent moment where they were very, very scary and actually threatened the caliph over here in Baghdad, but they were defeated right at the end of the 9th century and reduced to a smaller power, and then the Samanids basically beat them up and forced them to play nice. But this is a big chunk of territory, and again, we've got a lot of these big cities. You can just see how many of these cities would have been right along these trade routes, and they would have been making lots and lots of money off of all of these. Nishapur is a quite large one. That's a very, very ancient city. We've got Merv here. We've got Samarkand. Kabul, which is, recognizable today if you know anything about Afghanistan. This was a really very rich and very powerful empire. But things don't always last, right? And what ends up happening here? Well, some of the rulers decide to make some changes. For example, Ismail's son, when he takes over after his father dies, decides that it would be more proper for the Samanids to give up the Persian language and go back to the Arabic language that was sort of mandated by the Caliphate. Of course, the Caliphate at this point is the Abbasid caliphs, who still claim to be the nominal heads of all Muslims on earth. And theoretically speaking, the Samanids gave lip service to the caliph as a way to say that they were sort of under his rule. But especially this use of Persian as a official court language was a pretty big outlier. This was making them very obviously not super in with the rest of the group, right? So this is not going to go over very well. And Ismail's son, when he changes the court over to Arabic, is also going to suffer a couple of military defeats. And that's going to lead to him getting assassinated pretty early into his reign. He doesn't even make it very far into his adult life before he gets assassinated. Subsequent caliphs are going to, including our guide Nasser that I mentioned earlier, whose map we looked at, his reign extends until 943. They're going to allow these proselytes into the Samanid Empire. And this particular group of people were referred to as Ismaili. There's a apostrophe there. I guess I should type that into the notes, right? Now, the Ismaili were a particular type of Shia Muslim. And Shia Muslims lived alongside Sunni Muslims in a lot of the locations that we're talking about in the world tonight. Of course, the modern-day country of Iran, where a lot of this stuff is happening, is predominantly Shia today. But the Ismaili have particular types of beliefs about Shia Islam, and there are within Shia denominations and branches. And the Ismaili are a little bit more mystic in nature than some of the more literal versions of Shia Islam, and this didn't sit very well with some of the leadership, especially the military leadership. And what ends up happening is the caliphs are going to have this sort of rumble, not like a physical fight rumble kind of thing, but there's a lot of political chewing of the fat about whether or not these Ismaili proselytes are going to continue to be able to spread their message into the Samanid territory, and that causes a little bit of consternation between some of the noble families and the ruling family, and the military and the ruling family, and all of this sort of general bad blood is going to be what really starts the problem. And the problem is going to be rebellion. So the rebellions inside of the Samanid Empire shouldn't really be considered surprising. Ethnically speaking, they were very, very diverse, right? They have a lot of different people. They have a lot of different languages that are spoken there. They have a lot of different cultures. They have a lot of different religious ideology. So when you have a whole bunch of different people, putting them into one territory and telling them to be governed by somebody that's different than them, this is always a problem, right? But part of the problem was also sort of the messaging. Some of the ways that the Samani family got into power was this idea that they, as a family, had obtained recognition from the caliph. Not necessarily an individual or a specific individual line, but larger the Samani family. And if the Samani family had sort of been recognized as rulers of this area by the caliph, did that always have to be father to son, or could it be an uncle or a cousin or a nephew or something like that? And when you have these messaging issues and you have these cultural issues going on, it's not really surprising that you end up getting a lot of rebellions. And a lot of these rebellions were led by people that were part of the royal family, but not the ruling family. You get lots of revolts from cousins and uncles, and this is going to start tearing down the internal structure of the Samanid Empire. And what ends up happening is that these generals who were running the military are going to start getting co-opted by some of these rebels, right? Like, I swore an oath to protect the Samani family, and they go, well, I'm part of the Samani family, and they're like, okay, cool, I really didn't like that guy anyway, sure, I'll team up with you and we'll go try to kill him. But what this is going to end up doing is making the emirs By the way, this is technically an Amirate. Rebellion should be a command. We can make that happen. We can make that happen. So Amir is the title for their king. You may have seen this also spelled Emir. Like today we have the United Arab Emirates, ruled by an Emir. So the Emirs are going to reach outside of the territory to start looking for aid. You got to find somebody to come in to help you, right? If you can't trust your own family and you can't trust your own generals, who are you going to trust? Well, what they end up turning to were these groups of people called gulams. And this word literally just means slave soldier, or more specifically slave. And the Emirs began to make these raids into other territories, especially into further north and a little bit further east Asia, gathering a lot of Turkic peoples, a lot of people that had, been displaced from other areas. We talked about some of this northern Asian stuff going on a few streams ago. But there were new powers sort of brewing up here, especially over in this area where we have the Liao dynasty that's getting set up and is going to claim pretty much all of this. That really sort of causes a domino effect here into Central Asia. But they started going up and raiding and taking a lot of these people and bringing them into the empire and using them as soldiers. So you have these armies that are sort of beholden to the emir because they are slaves of the emir. And if you're starting to get like what we might say, I don't remember all of the individual cities, but this, a lot like the stuff that's over in the eastern realms of Game of Thrones, right, where they have these giant slave soldiers, the Unsullied, right? That's what we're talking about. Amir backwards is Rima, which means rhyme. And Amir backwards is rhyme, which sounds like rhyme. Irrelevant comment of the day. Irrelevant comments sometimes actually turn out relevant material, right? And I think that's an interesting conundrum. Not conundrum, similarity. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm really losing my words today. I needed to take a longer nap, I think. Coincidence. That's the C word that I was looking for. Tropical Geek, how are you doing, my friend? I hope that you're doing well. I looked around at some of the stuff on the website that you sent me, and I'm interested in trying to get some of that stuff, but it especially the coffee might wait until after I get a little bit more settled past next week. Next week I'm going to be gone for most of the week, and I don't really want stuff coming in and then sitting out on the porch for 4 or 5 days or stuff like that. But thank you for sending me those links. I appreciate it. So, things are not going so great for the old Samanids. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to pause for just a moment talking about the Samanids, and we're going to discuss another group. And this new group is called the Buyids. And worst case scenario, there's some tropical supermarkets around here. Oh, interesting. That is interesting. I need to get up to Chicago. I haven't been up there in a long time. And I've never really explored as much as I would like to. You can send me care packages. I appreciate that. I don't know how you're going to get lingua tacos to stay in a package. Right? There's a glorious Lego con this week. Oh, that's cool. I do really like Lego. I've liked Lego since I was a kid, right? Anyway, who were the Buyids? Well, the Buyids are going to be a group of people that get started by a guy named Ali ibn Buya. And, I can't show you a picture of him either. but we'll talk about him. He's a pretty interesting guy. So first off, he was ethnically Persian, but he was born in a rather poor family. His father was a fisherman and originally was Zoroastrian and converted at some point right before Ali's birth. And Ali was born sort of as a first generation Muslim. Now, there's an interesting trope, isn't necessarily the right word here, but pattern maybe. There's an interesting pattern that typically happens when we're looking at people who are going to convert either wholesale or family-wide, and especially in the ancient world, we see this fervor of the convert, where when you make this big shift, you really, really, really go into it. You just give it your all. You give it 100%. And we could explain this sociologically a lot of different ways. We could just say, well, yeah, you want to make sure that you're convincing yourself that it was worth it, or maybe it's all new to you, so you go at it with this sort of fresh-faced idea of, holy crap, look at all this cool stuff, and I'm trying to really get into it, and I really want to understand it. However you want to explain it, these first-generation converts to Islam, especially in the ancient world, are going to be particularly fervent, if that makes any sort of sense. Freeze them. That's an interesting concept. Brickworld, Chicago. In Puerto Rico, Spanish bulla is loud sounds of voices of people talking over each other. Huh. Interesting. The letters of rhyme, when converted to numbers, add up to 69. More relevant comments for the day. How did you get that numerology? Did you just list them like RHYME, what number they are in the alphabet? Maths. I did maths. Obviously. Oh, good gracious. Anyway, so this Islamic fervor is going to get Ali into positions where the son of a fisherman was never particularly really supposed to be. He ends up working his way into the political world of the Samanid dynasty, and he's going to find his position fairly high, believe it or not. Not just some sort of, low-level bureaucratic dude, but as a big advisor to one of the regional governors. So, he's not low on the scale. Started pretty low on the scale, but is a very smart guy, very capable individual, and managed to work his way into these positions that are much higher than his station might have afforded him otherwise. So he's also going to manage to work out appointments for his brothers. He has two brothers, and they're both going to end up getting positions within the government as well. Now, this is all happening right around the same time that some of this uncomfortableness is going on in the Samanid world, right? The internal structure of the Samanids is getting a bit shaky. And Ali sort of sees this coming, and he's going to start positioning himself and his brothers on the winning side. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means he's going to jump ship on people. When it looks like his people are going to lose, he will convert his allegiance from one side to the other. He will abandon people. He will sell people out. He always ends up being about one or two steps ahead of the inevitable, reaper, as it were. And people start recognizing how clever he is, right? That people start figuring out, like, this guy survived all of this political turmoil, and he's not even really supposed to be anybody. He's the son of a fisherman. That should have been the title of the stream tonight, and as soon as I said it, I'm the only boy that could ever reach me is the son of a preacher man. It should have been the son of a fisherman. Samani to Love is pretty good, right? I really like Queen. They're a good band, but You Hate This Guy reminds you of Lindsey Graham. Ooh, there's a little bit of comparison there. I will say this. Ali never really appears as craven as Lindsey Graham does appear sometimes. Maybe callow is the right word. It always looks like Ali is in charge. That's what's scary about it. He comes out not just in a better position, but in a more powerful position. Instead of sort of just skating around at the same level, dodging bullets, Ali is climbing the ladder of success. So much so that people start trying to assassinate him, and he survives at least 2 assassination attempts, not Lindsey Graham, Ali. And he's going to end up coming up with this concept that what he really needs to do is just carve out a piece of an army for himself, take a city, and then turn it into his own capital. Basically, like, I'm going to set myself up my own territory. Now, there's a bit of a question here. Like, if you're going to do that, where do you take territory? Where do you conquer stuff? Do you go take stuff from the Samanids? Because that they're supposed to be your nominal lords. But what's really interesting here, he doesn't die. Why are we throwing up the assassin? He doesn't die. You all are getting a bit too assassin happy. So now the counter is off. I guess that goes up to one of the people that got assassinated prior to us having the assassination counter. Lindsey Graham is not going to get assassinated. Let's not. I don't particularly care for his politics, but I don't wish him dead. And then KP just decided to actually go off. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Let's not abuse the commands. It's all good. Anyway, so we're going to go take a city. So where are we going to go? And Ali comes up with this kind of crazy idea. Why don't we just go take a city from the Abbasids? Now, this is a bold move, right? The Abbasids, again, are supposed to be the heads of all Islam. The Abbasids were having their own troubles, though. And we'll talk about the Abbasids and other new ruling families in in the Middle East on a later stream in this phase. But suffice to say, the Abbasids had their own trouble. And Ali is going to decide first to try to take this city called Isfahan, which is a really big city, and he gets some progress but ends up getting kicked out, and he ends up taking a city called Shiraz. And he takes this city, he puts himself into the leadership of this city, he carves out a territory around himself, and then says, I'm in charge. And he has this sort of bold move to send word to the Abbasid Caliph and go, hey, I'm in charge here. You should recognize me as ruler of this area. And this is kind of like this is a gutsy move here. I took this city from you. You should say that I control it. And in 934, the Abbasid Caliph is in such a bad position that he really can't do anything but say, all right, fine. And he gives not only the city of Shiraz, but the entire province of Fars to our guy Ali ibn Buya. So now he's got himself an entire province. But they're not going to stop, because he's also got 2 brothers, and they decide, well, hey, if he can go conquer some stuff, we'll go conquer some stuff. And one of his brothers decides, I'm just going to go take Baghdad. I wonder if we could get Baghdad. Could we totally get Baghdad? And they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Baghdad? I mean, come on now. Baghdad was one of the largest cities on Earth. It was one of the richest cities on Earth. It wasn't something that this fisherman's boy is just going to like roll up into and take it until he does. And in 945, Ali's brother ends up taking Baghdad. And his other brother is taking territory in Central Asia and into what is around the basically modern day country of Iran. And by 970, the Buyids are going to control all of this. They have basically made themselves this big chunk of territory where they're pretty much in control. So here is the Emirate of Shiraz, right? So here's Shiraz itself. This is where he's ruling. His other brother is up here in the Emirate of Ray, and his other brother is over here in the Emirate of Baghdad. So they've just got this nice big old chunk of territory. You never know until you try, right? Everybody says conquest is impossible until it's done, right? You can't take Baghdad, but they do. Now, they even end up jumping across. I don't know if I pointed this out here, but down here in Oman, right? So we can see down here in the Arabian Peninsula, they take this little strip of territory right here, and what that means is that they have both sides of the strait here. This is the Strait of Hormuz, and if you know anything, if we go back here to our full world map, this little strait right here controls basically sea access to the Persian Gulf, which means that all trade moving into these cities is going to have to go through territory that is controlled by the Buyids. Right? Believe in your dreams. Conquer that territory. This is motivational speech from the Buyid family, right? Name your city and claim your destiny, right? So they're putting themselves in a really, really powerful position. And this is something that kind of came out of nowhere. The Samanids aren't really going to know how to handle this. The Abbasids aren't really going to know how to handle this. And if we're just being honest, the Buyids don't really know how to handle it either. They've got a problem. There are 3 brothers, which means that there are 3 ruling families, and everybody wants to be the top ruling family, right? Everybody wants to be the most powerful ruling family. But there can be only one person in that position. And originally, his brother that took Baghdad had it, even though the Baghdad brother was actually the weakest of the 3. And then Ali took it, even though his other brother up in the Central Asian or Central Iranian region was more powerful than he was. And then we get into the next generation. We conquered all this territory. Now what do we do, right? Like it's the proverbial dog who caught the car, right? Like how does it work? Right? And they have lots of arguments about this. Their generation ends up causing trouble, and then they pass this trouble down into their children, and then their children's children. Sorry about that. I keep hitting these wrong buttons here, and I don't know what I'm doing. But they really have a pretty fascinating culture. The Buyids are going to, again, be some of these kind of new converts to Islam. And because of that, they're going to take a different track. Now, they were ethnically Persian, right? So they spoke Persian. They would have been taught that at a young age. They grew up in the court of the Samanids, where Persian was the official official language of the court. But when they take over, they decide that Arabic is the right way to go. And this is a sort of an interesting tonal shift here. They're going to be much more conservative in a lot of ways. For example, if we want to look at a piece of their art here, if this were made by the Samanids, you might see fish and flowers and people on this particular vase. But we do see just a little bit of a hint of life art. We've got a bird here that repeats, but everything else is just decorative when it comes to the art, right? We're not going humans. We don't show pictures of humans. You're not supposed to show pictures of humans because this, again, is a very conservative ideology. Also, they're going to start building lots of cool stuff because when you have a big empire, you want to build cool stuff. And this is what's referred to as the Quran Gate, and this is built in Shiraz. It's a pretty cool piece of architecture. The picture here is unfortunately not so great. But you get cool structures like this. Now, if you know anything about architecture, you might go, oh, that looks a lot like Roman stuff. Well, yeah, it kind of does. Because even though we're leaning a little bit more towards the kind of Arabic flavor here, we're also separating ourselves a little bit from the Samanids, where we're not going to, we're not going to look necessarily as Central Asian as they do. We're going to look a little bit more kind of late antique. And of course, Persia, the remnants of the Persian Empire that now by this point was almost 300 years gone. Well, I guess it was 300 years gone because it was collapsing in the 600s. Are still all over the place, and you can still see the old Sassanid ruins all over the place that are going to be influential to our Buyid dynasties. Now, we're going to have to leave the Buyids where we have them right now because there are other people coming, and I got something kind of stuck in my throat, so I need to cough. So let me hit the microphone real quick and then cough a couple of times. Sorry about that. Thank you. Green Herring, good to see you. Welcome in. Now, other groups of people that are going to start coming into play here. Oops, wrong group. Well, I mean, we'll get there in just a second. We won't go there. Let's talk a little bit about a group called the Ghaznavids. And we'll start with a guy named Alp Tegan. Tropical makes the joke. What's up, Nogur? Good to see you, my friend. Hope you're having a good one. What's up with these people? Well, this is yet another group that is going to get its start around this time period. And I just realized that I don't have a map for the Ghaznavids, which was a... Wait. I do. Yeah. Okay, I do. I'm going kind of crazy. Anyway. Who is Alp Tegan and why do we care? Well, Alp Tegan is an interesting fellow because he was one of these Turkic slaves that had been captured and brought into the Samanid Empire. And he had been sold into slavery when he was very, very young. And he had been in an interesting position where he actually got brought up in the capital with a lot of access to the actual court, the royal court of the Samanids. And so he had received an education, and he was around a lot of these people making the big decisions. And when, especially towards the late 40s and into the 950s, when this stuff is really going to be getting bad for the Samanids, Alp Tegan is going to be in a position where he is sort of a trusted fellow. He had become part of the army. He had thoroughly what you might call Persianized. Again, he had been raised in this sort of Persian culture. And he had been given a position within the army. Again, the whole reason we're bringing in a lot of these slaves is to sort of fuel the war machine, right? But he's going to get promoted very quickly because he's, again, a pretty smart guy. and he is going to be in a position to take a lot of advantage of this Samanid infighting, especially the stuff that happens at the end of the 950s and into the early 960s. Alp Tegan is going to recognize that there is a potential for an opening here. And he is going to take his army and move down into what is modern-day Afghanistan. And specifically to a city called Ghazna. Now, some other places call this Ghazni, and you can say Ghazna or Ghazni. The city is the same regardless. It's in modern-day Afghanistan. And when he shows up in Ghazna, he's showing up to sort of put down some of these regional dust-ups. This was sort of on the border of the Samanid Empire, and of course the borders are going to be where a lot of the crazy stuff kind of goes down, right? Because it's the furthest from the capital, etc. Well, he's going to show up and he's going to basically take over the city, and he does this in 963, and he's going to get recognized as the ruler of the city. Now, it's important to note here that when he gets the position of ruler of Ghazna, this is not an independent position. He is very clearly expressing his loyalty to the Samanids, but he knows that they're in bad shape. And he knows also that he is in a position where he can act with a lot of latitude because of the sort of dire need for support. When the emperor, or sorry, with the emir is in such bad shape, he's going to let you get away with a lot more because he can't really tick you off, especially if you're one of the few people that are actually loyal to him. And it does seem that Alp Tegan was loyal to the Samanids, both in word and in deed. Now, was he thinking for the future? This is an interesting question. Was he looking ahead to what was coming down the pipe? Absolutely so. He was not so stupid to think that the Samanids were just going to trip over and fall into this glorious period where they're going to rebuild their power and reestablish the empire and everything's going to be great and hunky-dory. He's seeing what's happening, right? You asked for a readmit in my uni that you were to take history classes. Oh, tropical, that's great. If you ever run into a situation where you need some help, you're welcome to send stuff my way. I'd be happy to let you bounce ideas off of me or give you references for stuff or answer questions. Congratulations, that's a good step, and I'm very proud of that. You indeed do know where to find me. Hopefully, I'm not too hard to locate. Because hopefully I'm around, for a while. You got interested in the history of African trade. We're going to talk about that quite a bit coming up, because this particular phase is going to introduce some new players into the game, and we're going to talk about especially Eastern African territories, and we're going to talk about Sub-Saharan Western African territories, both of which are going to be beneficiaries of trade networks. So, I am tropical, I can find efficiently. There we go, right? Understood. Anyway, so we'll actually talk about Africa probably more in this phase than we have in several of the previous phases, so I'm kind of looking forward to that. Again, world history, not just the Western history, all world history. We'll talk about all of it. Now, we've got our dynasty here. We don't have a dynasty yet, but what Alp Tegan does is make sure that his sons can inherit his position. So he does set the dynasty up. Because again, he's sort of looking into the future. He wants recognition of his family, he wants recognition of his sons, and he wants everybody to know that his larger clan is kind of in control. And that's going to be important because, well, in 974, the Samanids are in really bad shape, and the successors of our buddy Alp are going to decide that it's the right time. Right, we're going to rebel against the Samanids. We're going to try to establish ourselves as an independent kingdom. Now, you would think that this might be kind of easy with the Samanids being in the shambles that they were in, but it's not as easy as you might think. So what's going to end up happening is that the Ghaznavids, as they become known, are going to reach out to one of these Samanid nobles, right? One of these members of the family that wasn't in a ruling position. And they're going to say, hey, look, you should come over here. You can kind of be our standard bearer, and you can fight with us. Now, that by itself seems interesting, but the story here takes a really, really fascinating twist. And that is with the introduction of a Hindu power. That being the kingdom of the Shahis, which we can look at right here. If you're looking at our map, this is our Tibetan Plateau part. Well, actually, this is the Nepalese mountains. I apologize. This is the part of the Silk Road here that I keep pointing out as the Tarim Basin. But specifically, the kingdom of the Shahis sits right here on the gap between Central Asia and northern India. And this is the Khyber Pass. And they are really starting to get interested over here in Central Asian politics. The Shahis had taken over this territory in the late 800s, well, middle and late 800s, and had really started becoming interested in much more opportunities for Central Asian trade, because they controlled, again, the pathway in and out of India. And when you can control the pathways, you literally have a stranglehold on the trade. So if we're looking at this on our Google Earth map, they're sitting right here. And especially this big city called Lahore, which is really, really historic, has a really long and storied history. Anyway, the Shahis are going to pitch in on the side of the Ghaznavids and one of these Samanid groups, and they're going to say, look, here's the deal. We'll help you out. We'll send you troops. And if you end up becoming independent, we would like you to sort of be our official trade partners. And the Ghaznavids see this as a kind of a positive thing. Like, okay, well, if we're friends with the people that hold the choke point, that also then sort of makes us the new choke point. And if we can get kind of exclusive rights to trade with these folks, we're going to be in a good position to move goods in and out of India. So this is the idea. Now, you would think everything's going great and everything looks really, really good, and we're going to win on this one. But it doesn't pan out. The guy that ends up defeating them is this guy named Sabuk Tegin, who is actually the son-in-law of Alp Tegin. Sabuk Tegin was still loyal to the Samanids, and he's going to come down and put an end to this rebellion in 977. Now, why are our families fighting against each other? Why aren't they all fighting on the same side? Because Sabuk Tegin married into this sort of the larger Tegin family. Why is he fighting against them? Well, he sees an opportunity here. If he can get rid of this sort of hodgepodge rebellion, the Samanids will recognize him as the leader. And this is what actually does happen. He shows up, he beats them up, he takes over the city of Ghazna, and they're going to recognize him as the leader. Now, this sounds all well and good, and this is leading to something, I promise, and it's leading to this guy. This guy, who has a pretty cool picture here, is a guy named Mahmud of Ghazni. And he's the dude standing here on the the cool platform showing off his fancy dress. Who is Mahmud? Well, he's going to be the guy that really changes the game for the Ghaznavids. When Sabuk dies, that's some smug smile by the red beard in the front. This guy right here. This guy's totally unimpressed. This guy looks like, God, please let this be over soon. Oh, dude, I don't want to be here at all. This guy's clearly completely zoned out. He's thinking about what he's having for dinner. Right. Who obviously needs to stand on a chair since he's way shorter. Well, he's also young. He's very young. He ends up having to kill his brother to take over, but that's a whole other thing. This is Mahmud of Ghazni, and in 998, he is going to establish himself as the sole ruler of an independent Ghaznavid dynasty. And he's going to take a really, really fascinating move here, which is going to start something that is still a bone of contention in the world today. That being, he is going to start raiding into India, specifically for benefit of goods to begin with, but then also to take land. And it is Mahmud of Ghazni who is the first the first Muslim ruler to rule and set up a government of Islam in the Indian subcontinent. And if you don't know anything about what's going on in the world today in India, there's still a lot of tumult between Muslims and Hindu people in India today. There have been wars where millions of people have died and tens of millions of people have been displaced over this. It has been a long and storied tale. But this is where it starts. This is where Islam is going to first get into India and first start controlling territory, and it hasn't left since. So this is, about 1,000 years worth of a story that starts right here. Now, that of course is going to be left for later discussions, because what we need to do at this point is get back around to the Samanids and go ahead and collapse them, because they're sort of on their last legs at this point. So what happens here? Well, the Samanids were super weak. They had been relying on people from the outside. They had been playing Shuffle the Leader. They're playing musical thrones. You can call it whatever you want to, but they're in bad shape. And then comes another group, because you're like, how many groups can we have? A lot. Or rather, and the rest is made up history. Yeah, command world peace. Let's talk about the Karakhanids. So first off, wow, that's a really interesting group of people, right? I know all about the Karakhanids. Everybody knows about the Karakhanids. Who are the Karakhanids? Well, I can show you on the map. This might be a place to start. This is the Karakhanid territory. What am I doing here? We're looking here in the northern part of Central Asia, and specifically on cities that used to be controlled by the Samanids, like Samarkand and Bukhara. That was their capital. So this is sort of telling a story about what's about to happen here. The Karakhanids were a Turkic group that had been one of these adjacent Samanid powers that are going to start, having a lot of their people abducted, and they're going to end up being called upon quite frequently to aid the Samanids and stuff like that. And what this means is Islam is going to find its way up into their territory. And one of their important leaders, I spelled that wrong. I think I still spelled it. It's Bugra, not Burga. Bugra. Is it HR? Yeah, it's HR. What am I doing? And it's Satik, not Satuk. What in the devil? I can't spell today. My words are... I'm losing my words. No, it is a U. It is Satuk. Ugh. Satuk Bugra Khan. I don't do words after 6 p.m. Well, welcome to the group. I apparently don't do words at all. I need more coffee or something. Get the old brain juices flowing. Anyway. Yeah. God bless you, right? Who is this guy and what is he a big deal? Well, he was one of the leaders of the Karakhanids. So Khan, of course, being a title, he was the head of the Khanate. This guy was originally part of one of the Buyid groups, and he was supposed to be aligned with the Buyids, but when the chaos starts happening in the Samanid world, he kind of decides that it's his turn to kind of be independent. Now, he is going to convert to Islam, and this is a pretty big deal because as the leader of this whole group of Karakhanids, when he converts, this is going to basically lead the entire Karakhanid group to convert to Islam as well. Now, they had been following the traditional steppe religion, which is Tangri or Tingrism, whatever you want to call it, that was so popular amongst Turkish groups at that time. Turkic, not Turkish. Turkish is the modern people that live in Turkey. Turkic groups. Also popular with Mongols, who we'll talk about sooner rather than later, historically speaking. Anyway, so Satuk Bugra Khan is going to be an influential member because he starts really getting these people to think more like these Central Asian powers. They're going to try to settle down. They're going to try to take some of these cities, maybe. They're going to try to get into this trade game, right? And it's going to be his line that's going to end up causing most of the trouble for the end of the Samanid world. Now, he eventually does, of course, die. Everybody ends up doing that. This is his tomb. Of course, nice, very big, very obviously Muslim architecture going here. We've got some stuff that's kind of looking minaret-ish. Of course, we've got our really great geometric and geodesic patterns. This is the tomb of Satuk Bugran Khan. And you can go visit it if you want to. But his family starts off on conquest mode. And his grandson is going to be the one that really sort of upsets the entire apple cart. The Karakhanids had been taking territory from the Samanids for quite some time. But when it comes to 999, so right at the end of our period, the Samanid capital of Bukhara is going to fall to the Karakhanids. Now, the Samani family is actually going to survive. The Karakhanids, for whatever reason, don't decide to kill all of them, which is sort of a beneficent gesture. This isn't me criticizing, oh, they decided to let them live. There's a brief attempt in the early 1000s where the Samanids try to take power back again, but this is really not going to be a feasible move. They're done, right? And with the fall of the Samanids, what do we get? Well, we have kind of a three-way split for territory. The Karakhanids up here are going to take part of the northern chunk. The Ghaznavids are going to take part of this central chunk, and then the Buyids are going to expand here even further up the Caspian Sea coast and take some of this territory. So with the collapse of the Samanids, we get the expansion of all three of the groups that we were talking about tonight: the Buyids, the Ghaznavids, and the Karakhanids. Again, here are the Shahis, if you want to give them a little bit of a look in India. So the Samanids don't last that long, right? They kind of had their moment in the sun, and they did their stuff, and then they left. But they left behind a really interesting legacy. Specifically when it comes to literature. There's a guy named Rudaki. What about the Dagnabits? Well, they're usually just in opposition to everybody, and they're kind of just a general annoyance to everybody in their area. They didn't really ever have very much territory because they were just so sort of surly dispositioned and not particularly good to be ruled or being rulers. So they just always sort of hovered around and caused trouble for everybody wherever they showed up. Right? What's up, Viper? Good to see you. You should get a DNA test. They might have been a pan-ethnic community, right? They had people from all over the place. You never know. Anyway, starting with this guy named Rudaki, there is a really, really important literature and literary movement that starts in the Samanid dynasty and is continued through several other big poets in the world. Rudaki, though, is sort of the origin guy, or the first really big recognized guy that kind of went full sail on the idea that literature that is both Islamic in nature and religious and a-religious. So basically, we can write about whatever we want to, even though we're Muslims. And this had been something that had been kind of going on in places like Baghdad a little bit, but Rudaki's really going to bring this to Central Asia, and there is going to be a really big explosion of literature. And you're going to start getting written stories, but especially you're going to get a ton of poetry. And Rudaki and the people that followed him are going to establish a really powerful and very, very influential literary tradition of Persian court poetry, which is something that's going to hang around for a very long time. Rudaki was one of those rare poets that was sort of revered even while he was alive. And he was seen as a kind of a visionary individual. He kind of got into a little bit of politics every now and then, but mostly he just wrote really beautiful stuff. But how many authors do you see that get really big tombs like this guy? This is Rudaki's tomb. Big ol' honkin' mausoleum kind of thing. You don't see many poets get fancy shindigs like that, right? I mean, wasn't Poe buried in like a poor field or a potter's field or something like that? Anyway, Rudaki's really important, and the tradition that he starts is a very important one. And while the Samanids, politically speaking, didn't have this everlasting impact on the region with their political influence, a lot of their culture is going to be felt for centuries to come. Especially this idea that Persian literature can exist alongside of Islam. And that's a really, really lasting and important impact there. Looks like the Moody Church by your house. Interesting. So, that's actually all that I had, and we moved through that pretty quick, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think it had to do with mostly it was just me talking and not necessarily a whole lot of sidetracking and rabbit chasing, and that's okay, right? Not everybody's always down for the rabbit chases, but I do think that this period of time is really fascinating, and I do think that a lot of these territories don't get enough coverage, and these times especially don't get a lot of love when it comes to World Civ. So even if it's not something that we're really exposed to a lot, I do think that it's important to still know that a lot of this stuff happened. And if you don't remember who the Samanids were, or if you don't remember who the Ghaznavids were, the big takeaways are we get Persian court poetry and Islamic stuff that's really, really cool. We get the expansion of Islam into India, which is really pivotal. We get the rise of independent groups that are going to start questioning the caliphate. These are the big sort of broad strokes things from tonight. Was Alice in Wonderland the origin of metaphorical rabbit chasing? That's a great question, and I don't know the answer to it. Perhaps. I got on this weird rabbit hole. Maybe so, Moose. That's a really great question. You would think that somebody like me that is sort of all in with the idiom knowledge would know that, but I don't actually know if that's the case or not. It makes sense for it to be. Yeah, maybe so. What's your favorite breed of sandwich? I do like a good Philly cheesesteak. Pretty big fan of the Philly cheesesteak. I also really like a good French dip if the au jus doesn't come from like a mix, right? Like if it's actually made from the roast beef drippings. I like a Reuben because I'm a big fan of sauerkraut. I like the corned beef sauerkraut combo, right? That's a good one. Good shrimp po' boy is never bad. I actually, oh man, a shrimp po' boy actually sounds really, really good right now. Man, I haven't had a shrimp po' boy. I can't even remember. Soon. I'm a foodie. I really enjoy eating food. So it would be easier for me to tell you the stuff that I don't like. I'm not a big fan of the BLT. I know that makes a lot of people very upset, but if you have to rely on mayonnaise for flavor on your sandwich, it's not that big of a deal. Lettuce is basically trying to convince you that that sandwich is worthwhile. And I don't necessarily like the overwhelming taste of tomato. So I do like bacon, right? You know, like I don't hate bacon, but it's not the BLT is not my thing. A Cuban sandwich is fine. A muffalado is fine as long as they don't go too heavy on the olive stuff, right? Olives can get a little bit overwhelming in muffalado. I'm not the world's biggest fan of olives. In 1865, Lewis Carroll introduced the idiom in the novel. There we go. Would be funny if it was already established before Alice and they piggybacked. There we go. While the concept of chasing a rabbit was metaphorical, expressed in before Lewis Carroll, Allison popularized it for sure. If you ever visit Shane, I'll treat you to a local cheesesteak. Being so close to Philly, we have their pretty. They don't have the Cheese Whiz. I'm a little bit on the fence about the Cheese Whiz. I think you can get a good Philly without Cheese Whiz as long as it's got provolone. Provolone is a perfectly logical replacement for Cheese Whiz for me. I know that the Whiz is important for a lot of people, And I know that a lot of people say that you don't actually get a Philly if it doesn't have the whiz on it, but I don't think you have to have it. I think it's okay if you just go with a provolone. But you can't stray from the provolone. It's not like I don't want a Philly cheesesteak with mozzarella. No, that's not what I'm after. I mean, I would eat it and I would probably enjoy it, but at that point, we're just getting too far away, right? Although apparently Confucius had a phrase, if you chase two rabbits, you will not catch either one. That does sound really interesting and very much Confucian, considering his whole thing was you need to do your job and focus on doing it the right way. Ooh, I do like a good hot Italian beef. Oh man, there's a spot in Tuscaloosa. It's called Big Daddy's that makes one of the best Italian beef sausages I've ever had in my life. Italian beef sandwiches. It comes with sausage. It's Italian beef and sausage. Basically, they take the bun and they put a big Italian sausage in the bun, and then they just pile the beef and the pepper relish on top of it, and it's just, oh my gosh. Oh, dude, such a good sandwich. Such a good sandwich. Have I had Baltimore pit style beef? I can't say that I have. I can't say that I have. That doesn't mean that I haven't, and I just don't remember it, but I can't say that I have. Lettuce is watercolored in. I'd be shocked if they didn't have a good pit beef place in DC. Provolone is your preference. I'm definitely seeking out a good barbecue place while you're there. I don't know of a good barbecue place in DC. And I saw your question about what sandwich you should eat. I don't know of a particular sandwich that I would suggest. My references would be the Ethiopian place or the Chinese place that serves a really good Peking duck. It used to be a lot easier to do this, but you go down to the market and get soft shell crabs. I don't even know if they still have soft shell crabs at the DC fish market anymore. But that was always good. The thing about eating whole boiled crabs though is like it takes so long to clean them, and you get like this tiny little handful of meat. It's more about the experience. Or you're sitting there with your friends with a hammer and you're just bashing your food, right? Baltimore's pit beef is our version of roast beef. Interesting. You love everything from Porto's. I don't know if I've had anything from Porto's Bakery. You don't like eating steamed crabs, you love crab cakes. I do love crab cakes because the work is already done for me, but I'll eat a crab or two until I get... Well, and I want to be full first. I don't want to have to rely on eating the crab as a way to get full, because you won't get full off of those. Based on my understanding of the vernacular, for the longest time, I thought that Cheese Whiz was the liquid that seeps out of hard cheeses. You're not too far wrong from that. It's hydrogenated cheese product. It's not actually cheese. And it's basically a vegetable oil kind of cheese product. Interesting stuff. Cave has a poem about the chocolate eclairs from Porto's. Interesting. I'll have to ask him about that. All right, so here's the thing. When we get around to next week's Tuesday stream, we have an interesting scenario. So, on Tuesday night, when I was on Homozygote's channel, I got quite a few follows, and it put me over 1,000. So, this is a pretty interesting threshold. 1,000 is a big number, and it's kind of crazy to think that I have that many people that have been in the stream and decided to give me the follow. But importantly, what that means is we are primed for a History of Middle Earth stream. Now, supposed to be Tuesdays are supposed to be viewer request streams, right? And we do have a viewer request that has been sitting for quite some time on the fall of the Soviet Union. What's up, Lumpy? Good to see you. So, just by show of hands or interest or typing your preference in the chat, would you all rather have viewer request fall of the Soviet Union, or would you rather have history of Middle Earth? Are still alive despite the odds? Well, that's good to hear. I'm glad to see you. I know that you've been going through a lot at work lately, so it's good to see you. And if you all would rather think about it, I can also just sort of put this as a poll in the Discord. But I figured I would ask people that were here and get sort of a straw poll preference. Or you might not have a preference. Yeah, which is kind of what I figured. Like, you just decide, and we'll just show up. Which I appreciate, and that's a lot of honor that's given in that idea. Just like, whichever you want to do. But I figured I would at least ask. Things are settling down, and your clients ask you to save their butts again. You're not going to be here Tuesday, so you feel that you should abstain. Well, perhaps you should vote on which one you would rather miss. Like, if I can't be here Tuesday, I would rather miss this one than that one. Perhaps. At this point, you mostly just show up to pretend to mishear things. That's okay. I hope that you're getting some knowledge out of it, that something is getting through there. But I appreciate the light trolling as well. So, okay, I'm pretty clearly not going to get... you consider that, and it sounded unfair. It's okay, dude. It's okay. I'll put something in the Discord, and we'll get people to respond to that. What's in the news? You got something specific you want to talk about? Oh, whatever I want to talk about. Let's see. What is in the news that I want to talk about? I mean, we could talk about Kherson if we wanted to, the dam getting blown up. Yeah, there's a lot to pick from, and I don't really know. What's up, Tanker? Good to see you. How about this? What if we just open the news and then I scroll through the world section and find something that tickles my fancy? I mean, we could obviously talk about the stuff going on in Ukraine, which is actually what most of the news is about. Yeah, Canada's on fire. I always try to think of stuff that's like not getting a lot of attention, because that's sort of why I put that one in there, because I like talking about stuff that doesn't really hit like the super high headlines. This is the portion of the stream where Shane scrolls through the newsfeed and still can't find anything to talk about. Oh, we could talk about Afghanistan, because it's actually appropriate for tonight, because we talked about Afghanistan already. So, when America went into Afghanistan at the beginning of the 2000s, so this is after the 9/11 attacks, right? We went into Afghanistan. We did so with the auspices of eliminating the Taliban as a political threat, as they harbored terrorists, And we stayed there for 20 plus years and didn't get rid of the Taliban. Then when we left, the Taliban took back over. Now, what's interesting here is that throughout this whole period of time, Afghanistan remained the world's largest producer of opium. Opium is the biggest cash crop in Afghanistan. And while America was kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, ushering, monitoring, helping, aiding, puppeting, whatever you want to call what we tried to do in Afghanistan. While America was in Afghanistan and overseeing, we'll just use that broadly, the government, one of the things that we really wanted Afghanistan to do was crack down on opium. And they never really did. In fact, one of the people that got elected as a leader of one of the presidents of Afghanistan was part of a family who was literally the largest opium dealers in Afghanistan. The guy's brother. So we have the president, and then his brother was like this opium drug lord. So there wasn't a lot of movement towards fixing this opium issue. And about 2 or so weeks ago, the Taliban, who's now in charge of Afghanistan, started talking about cracking down on opium. And they have started putting in actual guidelines and started taking action in the last few days to really, really crack down on opium production, sale, and production. Production, sale, and distribution. Here's the thing, though. The Afghan economy is basically non-existent. The Taliban has absolutely wrecked the economy. Not that it was doing well when America was over it. Their economy is going downhill already, and then they are going to crack down on opium. Opium is how a substantial portion of people in Afghanistan make their living. And what's happening here, and this is a weird situation because it's going to sound like I'm pro-opium, which I'm not. The Taliban, in its attempt at getting rid of opium, is depriving thousands of people in Afghanistan jobs. And this is effectively grinding down their economy even more than it already was. Because what's happening is that the government has said opium bad, but they also then haven't really tried to offer any alternative. They haven't tried to set up any sort of mechanism that would allow people to make the same amount of money while not growing opium, right? Let's see. You need to have redeemed this for Gene Simmons. I don't know anything about that because honestly, I don't care about what Gene Simmons does. I don't know why he's over there. I could not care less about what Gene Simmons is doing in the UK. You heard that there are mines floating in the flood around Kherson. I haven't heard that. Trump was indicted tonight. Was he? Trump indicted. Yeah. It happened while I was on stream, so I missed it. That's interesting. I'll have to read those. Canada needs to stop it. The Supreme Court ruling, which one? Are you talking about the one, the union decision, Tuna? The one where or are we talking about the Alabama voting district ruling? We could talk about both of those. Talking and doing are two different things. Right, exactly. So now I guess heroin prices are going to go up and supply down and fentanyl ODs will go up. This is going to have a global impact, right? I suspect the fentanyl sales are behind the crackdown. I don't know. The Taliban had really cracked down on it in the 90s. They had, but I'll just say that is correct. That is correct. And the reason that they had been able to do so was a combination of the fact that their economy was already used to basically being under wartime because of all of the stuff that was going on in the 80s with the Russian invasion, and the fact that the Taliban had effectively co-opted the government at that point as well. But that's a whole other thing. Indicted on 7 counts. Interesting. I'll have to look that stuff up. The gerrymandering decision. Okay, so briefly, in 2013, the Supreme Court of the United States decided that they were going to remove a portion of the Voting Rights Act. When the Voting Rights Act was passed, one of the things that it included was a requirement that southern states in the United States had to ultimately allow the federal government to review districting lines. And in 2013, the Supreme Court decided, you know what? We're past racism, so we don't need to make them do that anymore. And so they struck down that portion of the requirements. And immediately, southern states began to gerrymander their districts again. And this has gone on for a decade, and everybody knows that it's happening. And everybody knows exactly why they're doing it. It's not hard to know why Alabama, which is a state that is almost a third black, only has one representative that is black. And I can exactly show you why. I used to live in Alabama. Effectively, when the voting districts were made, they did so with the specific intent of creating one district where they could elect a black member of Congress. Let me see if I can get this image open. Yeah, that's not looking what I thought it would do. Let me save this. Let me go back over here. All right, here we go. So this is the voting districts, or these are the voting districts in Alabama. This particular district here is the one that was gerrymandered in order to specifically have a black member of Congress. So if you don't know anything about the location of cities, this particular weird appendage right here goes up the highway and to Birmingham, and includes the city of Birmingham, but none of the surrounding areas, which are predominantly white. Birmingham itself is a predominantly black city. This includes Tuscaloosa, and this includes this weird little appendage right here is the suburb, or the part of Montgomery, but not the suburbs of Montgomery that are predominantly white. And the same thing for all of this stuff down here. So like all of these weird little things include the cities themselves, but not the suburbs. And this was done specifically to dilute a third of the population and give them 1/6 of the representation. Now, what the Supreme Court has suggested is that they have to redraw these district lines in order to produce a system where at least 2 people of color might be able to be elected. And I don't know exactly how that's going to play out. I think that it's going to be a really weird thing, and I don't know if this is particularly done, right? I don't know if it's a done deal, but it's an interesting decision. Blue, what's up? Good to see you. We are past the main line, and we are to the back end of the chat where I'm basically just fielding random questions. Yeah, it is fishy herring. It is very, very fishy. So that's what's going on in the news. I'll have to read up on the Trump indictments. I don't know. I will say this: if you are fervently hoping that former President Trump ends up in jail, don't hope on that. Be realistic. I suspect that this is not going to end the way that anybody wants it to, and I don't suspect it's going to end with him being barred from office or in jail. So, just calm on. What should I do for 5 hours in my Houston layover? Stay in the airport, because I don't know if you're going to be able to get anything done with 5 hours in Houston. Now, if you have 7 hours in Houston and you can spend an hour on either side getting out of the airport and into Houston to do something, sure. But remember that you've got to go back through security when you do that, and it's a long way from the Houston airport to actually anything worth doing in Houston. The airport's kind of far out, so it's going to cost you money to get into an Uber to go do anything in the first place, and you're only going to have about an hour to do it, or maybe 2 hours. So I would, if it were me and I had 5 hours in Houston, I wouldn't leave the airport. But that's just me. If you can think of something cool to do, do it. I really want to know what chemicals made his face that color. Check out the ridiculous Texas gift shops in the airport. I think you came in on Afghan. Okay. Checking in. Did he get a new tan? I don't even. I mean, I know that you like paints and stuff like that, but I'm not interested enough in how Trump looks orange. All right. I think it's time for us to go ahead and go do a raid. I know that we finished material fairly early tonight, and that's okay. Where are we going to go?
You want it?
Ooh, that's loud. Let's go raid Homozygote, because that was a good chat the other night, and it'll be like a little bit of a thanks to bring some friends back over that way. So there's the plan. All right, everybody. I'll try to be back around this weekend to do Gundam stuff. I don't know if that's going to be possible. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now, so maybe, I don't know. We'll see. But again, we'll have a stream Tuesday. We won't be around Thursday because I'll be at Heroes Con. So shout adventure, throw adventure hats in the chat. Thanks everybody for hanging around, and I'll see you next time. So take it easy, everybody.